Hello once again, everyone, and welcome to the show that everyone is talking about, Exciting Episcopalians. I'm Bill Green, and today we may have gotten an exciting Episcopalian. He is Bishop Thomas Brown.
We'll see about that.
We will. In 20 minutes, we'll know for sure. And you're our neighbor. You live right here in Portland.
I do indeed, just around the corner from Trinity Church on Belmont Street. And so I can see from my study on the third floor the spire of this great church.
I checked it out looking the other way this morning, but you're looking through some trees. So now, were you a cradle Episcopalian?
I'm not. I grew up in the United Methodist Church.
Me too.
And it was an important part of my family's life. I come from really a clergy dynasty. Both of my father's grandfathers were bishops in the Methodist Church. And so the Methodist Church, especially on my dad's side of the family, has been an important part of generations and was an important part of my life too.
So all I can think of is our link letter saying he was a PK, a preacher's kid.
Right.
What's it like being a PK?
So I wasn't a preacher's kid. I'm a preacher's great grandkid, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Is what we call it. Well, I think the important thing about that part of my story and my family story is the degree to which church was just integrated into who we were as a family. There was never a question about whether we were going to church on Sunday. It was just it was the same as going to school on Monday through Friday. There wasn't a debate the night before about whether you were going to school. And there wasn't a debate about not just going to church for worship, but the life of formation and service and scripture being part of who we were.
So we know based on that answer that you weren't a soccer player.
I was not a soccer player.
Were you a good student? What were you like as a kid? What were you doing in high school for fun?
Yeah, so one of the things I did in high school was leadership in the church, both at the regional and the annual conference level, which would be like the diocesan level, and throughout the United Methodist Church. So I traveled in my junior and senior years in high school, all over the country, leading meetings of other youth. Yep. So that was a big part of my life. The second big part of my life was to work. My family had a dairy farm and we had a funeral home.
I've never milked a cow.
Well, that is a bad thing.
Okay, get out there.
You
okay.
need to fix that. Well, we had 30 head of Jerseys, and if you've been around cows, you know that Jerseys are particularly beautiful and full of fat. So they have a very rich product. So between the dairy farm and the funeral home that my family had, I actually worked a lot. And the other thing I did in terms of, I was a good student. I wasn't a great student, but I test well. And so that meant that I got good grades.
My theory is that we took liberal arts and gave them to the farm kids in the 19th century, and that's how school evolved. Now that we don't have those practical skills, we need them, a little bit more at school. And so home ec and wood shops and things like that would be helpful for me.
So I love that you're talking about home ec and wood shop, because I went to a school where both were required for all 4 years of high school. And when I finished college, I actually taught, I don't tell a lot of people this, I taught home economics in Plainwell, Michigan.
Yep.
And I was not a foods person and I was not a textiles person, but I was a family studies person and consumer science. So at that time, this is in the early 90s in the state of Michigan, it was required, even if someone was college bound, students had to take shop and had to take home ec. And so home ec departments were big. There were 3 of us teaching family studies and consumer science, teaching people life skills about compound interest and things like how to plan on life insurance. Anyway,
and I didn't finish my thought. That would also include, instead of phys ed being kickball, it would be a personal exercise program.
Exactly, right.
Diet and nutrition and those kinds of things. So you got into college.
I got into college. I went, as we say in Michigan, if someone is from the Upper Peninsula, I went down below to school.
All right.
And so I went down below to Kalamazoo and was in a joint degree program at Kalamazoo College and Western Michigan University, which are adjacent to each other.
What's Kalamazoo College like?
Kalamazoo College is a liberal arts school in the American Baptist tradition, but not at all religious. It's it's not on a par with Bowdoin and Bates, but maybe with Colby and other select liberal arts colleges. I wouldn't get into Kalamazoo College now, but at the time I did.
Oh, I bet you would. You tested well.
And then next door, literally across the street, is one of the state's biggest universities, and so I was at both places. And Kalamazoo is a fabulous town.
What was your major?
So I studied education and communications and speech, and that was a big part of, I was on the debate club and did all those kinds of things.
Yeah. And as I say to find out how old people are, what year did you graduate?
I graduated from college in 1992. I was born in 1970.
Okay, we'll let the smart people among us know. When's your birthday?
28th of September.
Okay, that's not a Virgo, that's something else. Libra.
Right.
Is that a good sign for a bishop?
I don't know if it's a good, I would think so. Okay. Yeah.
So you taught home ec for a couple of years?
I taught home ec for a year and a half in Plainwell, was already, had expressed a call to ordained ministry in high school, discovered the Episcopal Church through my United Methodist bishop, who sent me to the Episcopal bishop.
What did you like about it?
That's a great question. I liked the people. I liked the older ladies who gave me food. I liked the coffee hour. To be quite honest, Bill, finding the Episcopal Church was not love at first sight. It really was an acquired taste. I found the worship confusing, kneeling, standing, sitting. The musical tradition was not one that I knew. And it's so funny to me now because I love everything about our tradition. And it's funny to me that it probably took me a year before I developed an appreciation and a regard for the rhythm that so many of us love about our church.
Do you think that the fact that you came from outside the tradition and you got an objective look at it helps you in your ministry now?
I think so. I think that absolutely. So one of the things about this role that I'm in now is understanding and helping people in Maine understand that these denominational identities are less and less important, and that partnership with other Christian bodies is really our future. And so it's not to say that we should jettison our traditions, but it is to say that we might hold them a little more lightly and have some regard for other Christian traditions and ways of doing things that are different from us. So I think it is a great help.
We seem to be taking a beating as Christians because we believe in God and Christ. And it's got to be a tough time to be a bishop because I think part of what you want to do is build the tradition and actually, maybe even more importantly, is show people what great things can happen to them and are available to them at churches. I really like going to church. I really like being an Episcopalian. But I'm kind of in the wrong demographic to be saying that to too many people because, kids today. Right. It's a tough time to be a bishop.
Actually, Bill, it's not. It's a great time to be a bishop, at least a bishop in Maine. I can't speak about other contexts. I find that everywhere that we are, and as you know, we're in all 16 counties of this great state, every place where we are, there is something happening in and through that local church that is proclaiming the good news of God in Christ. And I think some of the cultural objection to organized Christianity, I think that is dissipating. And what I'm discovering in places like Brownville Junction and places like Millinocket and Jefferson is an increased interest by secular leaders, whether they're in education or in government, in partnering with us, particularly with those of us in a mainline tradition, because we have demonstrated a care for our neighbors. So I think some of that static that was very loud maybe a decade ago, I find it not only less loud, but in fact, doors being opened to us in a way that might have been a little more common in the 1950s. I'm not sure. But it's a great, I am blessed. And one of the great things about being your bishop is that every day I wake up and I feel joy. And if that stops, I promise that I will say thank you to all of you and move on. But as long as there's joy, there is beautiful work to do.
And I do think that you're having a good run. I mean, I do sense that what you say is true. I mean, we are on a little bit of an up, but I don't want to be too optimistic about it because I hear national trends are down.
Of course. And I think it's absolutely true to not sort of have rose-colored lenses about the real challenges that we face as Christendom, the sense of sanctioned Christianity in our culture. As that leaves us, there are real challenges to identity and challenges also to grief and to nostalgia. I think that this is a loving challenge that I'm offering all of us, that holding on to what was, we really have to resist that and try to move forward to what might be. That's a big challenge.
I've got to, this is about you, and we probably have been too philosophical here, so I want to get you from Western Michigan to wherever you went. You were teaching, and then, but you knew you were going to be ordained.
So what happened is this Episcopal bishop, I did not know that the Methodist bishop and the Episcopal bishop had a significant meeting in person in Lansing. The Methodist bishop's office was in Detroit. The Episcopal bishop's office was in Kalamazoo. They met in Lansing for something else, and in this meeting, they ended up spending a great deal of time talking about me.
No kidding.
And what I didn't know is
that a good thing or a bad
well, it
thing?
turned out to be a great thing, because I got a letter from the Episcopal bishop saying he would pay for a year of seminary for me.
Wow.
And I didn't know where that came from. So I went off to the Church Divinity School of the Pacific in Berkeley, California. And I couldn't figure out why. At every turn, other seminarians were talking about how difficult the ordination process was and how things were bad with the bishop or their rector or the commission on ministry. And I would just sit there and say, well, things are going great for me. And the door kept opening and opening and opening. And on the day of my ordination as a transitional deacon in 1997, back in Kalamazoo, about a half an hour before the liturgy began, the Episcopal bishop handed me a letter from the Methodist bishop written 4 years earlier, saying, this person is someone that I encourage you to get to know. So I'm so grateful to God for that synchronicity and serendipity and a sense of great grace.
And so where was your first church?
So I graduated from the seminary in Berkeley, California, and was invited to be on the faculty and staff. I had no business.
Oh, good, because I want to ask you about Berkeley. How was that?
Berkeley was great. Berkeley is a fun place to live and a fun place to study. I didn't love Northern California in the way that most people do. I found the traffic really, really maddening. I drove down the peninsula to Menlo Park next to Stanford University for field education. And on Sunday mornings, it would take me 35 minutes. But if I ever had to go to St. Bede's, that was the name of the church, is the name of the church, during the week, I sometimes literally had to plan on 2.5 hours to just get there one way. Anyway, I didn't love Northern California in a sense of I knew I would get back to the Midwest or to the East eventually. But the seminary offered me this kind of temporary position to teach pastoral theology and to raise money from alumni and alumni. And so I did that for 3 years. I served at church very part-time as the lowly curate at St. John the Evangelist in the Mission District of San Francisco, an urban Anglo-Catholic, very small church doing great things and still is. And learned from a tremendously faithful priest who really took me under his wing, and really to this day, so much of what that priest taught me, I still do. Things like saying, he once said to me, Thomas, it's always okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got called to St. Michael's Church in Brattleboro, Vermont in 2000.
Very similar to San Francisco.
Well, except lovely small town where there isn't a lot of traffic, right?
Right, there you go.
But it's true, a fairly progressive town. But the church at that time was pretty traditional.
I was thinking, I was thinking a stark difference from San Francisco.
Right.
Shouldn't be sarcastic, I'm sorry.
Well, Brattleboro is a very crunchy granola town.
Okay.
So that's why I thought you might have.
Yeah, actually, if I was wiser, I probably would have.
And St. Michael's is a gem of a parish, and I was there for a decade. And that's where I met my spouse, Tom. I was just back at St. Michael's for the first time last month. The longtime music director retired, and I was invited back. And, many of those people who were there are still there. And it was a great, wonderful decade of learning.
That's wonderful. And then Winchester, Massachusetts?
Right. So I was called to Epiphany in Winchester, Massachusetts.
Did you know Peter in Massachusetts?
I didn't. Peter and I knew of each other quite well because the woman with whom I worked at Epiphany, the associate rector, is a very close friend of Angela and Peter's. They're both from Maine, and so I knew of Peter as long as, I guess that was in 2004. I've heard about Peter.
So, but Winchester's kind of an upscale town.
It is.
And Episcopalians have a kind of upscale history. Are we seeing a traditional old Episcopal church in Winchester that's got lots of money and
a significant amount of money, but very influenced by an incredibly faithful social gospel-oriented priest who was there from 1965 until 1989.
slow that down? An incredibly faithful.
Social gospel-oriented priest.
What does that mean, social gospel?
Really involved in the community, really making sure that people in the pews were engaged with people outside of the church.
That's good.
So we were in Boston. Some group of parishioners was in some part of Boston 4 days a week, engaged in humanitarian, charitable, or seismic justice-oriented system change.
Yep.
And this really was, the priest's name was Jack Bishop, and Jack arrived in 65, and in 1965, Epiphany Winchester was absolutely linked to the local country club.
Sure.
Literally.
Absolutely. The Bushes were there.
Vestry
I like the
meetings
Bushes.
happened at the local country club.
Yep.
So in 1965, Vietnam comes along. Jack gets engaged in that debate. And in 1968, 2/3 of the parish left and did not pledge.
Yep.
And the wardens hung in there with Jack. And in 2 years, there was a new church. Young people moving to Winchester at the time in their mid-20s and early 30s, starting a family, who were formed on college campuses in the 1960s, wanted what it was that Epiphany was becoming. And so it was not reflective of some of those things that we might have assumed it was. And so when I was called in 2009, I thought for sure the fact that I was a married gay man would be a kind of concern. It was actually, for that particular faith community, a reflection of their faithfulness for the last almost 3 decades.
Yeah. No, I hear you about that. I want to ask you about becoming a bishop, because you became a bishop out of Winchester. Just between me and you, because nobody really watches this show, how does that happen? How do they, does somebody say, this guy would be a good bishop, and they literally call you, or are there bishops talking about you? How's that happen?
Well, it happens in all of those ways that you just described. The Diocese of Maine had an incredible invitation to the whole church, throughout the church. People could nominate anybody to be the next Bishop of Maine.
Can I nominate the next Bishop of Maine if I wish?
Yep.
Okay, please keep going.
So what happened is, and I know 3 people who nominated me. There was a priest in Maine and 2 people outside of Maine. And there were 4 other people who nominated me, and I don't know who they are. I don't know where they came from. All I know is that the process in Maine was, as soon as someone was nominated, the search committee sent that person an email and said, "Dear Bill, you have been nominated to be the next Bishop of Maine. If you're interested in pursuing this, here's the link to the essays you have to do." And so I got one of those emails, and then another, and eventually 7.
So what do? You turn around and say, Tom, I just got this interesting email here. What do you think?
Right. Exactly. I forget, this was in the month of May in 2018.
Okay, wow.
And so the deadline for responding to 3 very straightforward essay questions and submitting a resume, I think was June 1st or June 15th. So I did that.
So maybe your friends were kind of on the fence and did it at the last minute. Right?
Exactly. And I remember being at General Convention, which is our major 3-year body that creates policy for us, in July of 2018. And the Diocese of Massachusetts, I was a deputy, was at the same hotel as the deputation from Maine. And so every morning I'd be in the Starbucks line with all these people from Maine, including Bishop Lane. And what I knew was that in the middle of this 10-day meeting in Austin, Texas, I was going to have to spend an evening in my hotel room on Zoom with an interview with your Bishop Search Committee.
Which was in line with you that morning at Starbucks.
Exactly. And so that was in July of 2018. And I guess I passed the video interview because the next action was to be invited to what I refer to as the Hunger Games, which is actually
like
called
fun,
a discernment retreat. And that was up at Point Lookout in Northport. And we were 7 people at that point. 36 people applied.
Was that part public? Did we know who those 7 were?
No, at that point, you did not know.
Okay.
We all knew, the 7 of us, and our spouses had to come. That was very unusual at that stage, to have spouses come. I was the only person at that retreat who was from New England. Everybody else had a pretty big airplane ride. So we were 14 people, 7 candidates and 7 spouses.
And you're all kind of looking at each other.
We're all looking at each other. It was a 3-day process of interviews, some private, some together with other candidates. There was a presentation that each one of us had to make. We had to lead worship. And we all knew that not all of us were going to be invited to the ballot.
Yep.
So we left saying goodbye to each other, and we would just have to wait. And that was in October of 2018. And at the end of November, your ballot was announced, and I was on the ballot.
Okay, that's
And at that point, I was one of 5.
Okay.
And so the people of Maine got to choose from 5 of us.
And how did we do that? Did we all vote, or?
You did all vote. So the way that happened is that on February 9th in Bangor.
My hometown.
Is it?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I'm a Bangor Ram.
Did you grow up at St. John's
I
Church?
did not. I was a Methodist.
You were?
And I came to the Episcopal Church because both Pam and I had kind of left the church, and I was thinking of coming back to church, and Pam asked me, how would you like to get married in a church? And she was a cradle Episcopalian, and so we went to the
And
cathedral.
where did Pam grow up?
Church of the Good Shepherd in Holton.
Oh, she did.
Very much a part of her family life. You know.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep. So,
How blessed and lucky is she? So on February 9th, every church, as you know, at the annual meeting, you elect delegates to diocesan convention. So all of the lay people vote from each church, and all of the clergy. And we, those of you who were voting, drove to Bangor on February 9th for what's called an electing convention. This was after the 5 of us were with you in January of 2019 for what we call the walkabouts or the dog and pony shows. And we traveled around with our spouses, and people could ask us questions in a kind of town hall format. So that was in January. And then in February, all of you gathered in Bangor to vote. And a person has to be elected with a majority by both the clergy and the lay people voting separately. So what very often happens in these bishop elections is that the laity have a favorite candidate and the clergy have a different candidate. And so it sometimes can take several ballots before one of the community's laity or clergy yield to the other. Usually laity prevail. Usually if someone is leading in the lay order on the first or second ballot, they're often the one who is elected. In my case, it was the opposite. I was not the leading candidate among the laity, but I was among the clergy. And it took 3 ballots, and I was elected on the 3rd ballot in February of 2019.
Did you have like a platform? I don't want to say an agenda, or did you say, I think I want to go do this? Or is it just, he's a good person, we want him?
I think it's a combination of all of that, Bill. One of the things that we said in Maine, you were saying about what you wanted in your next bishop, was someone who could speak and witness to the power of Jesus Christ in their life. And so that was an easy and authentic and natural thing for me to be able to talk about. I think people sometimes, senior bishops sometimes ask junior bishops, so why do you think you got elected? I think one of the reasons I got elected is because I was the only person on the ballot with real New England experience, and a combination of Vermont and suburban Boston resonated with many people in Maine, and the other candidates didn't have that. And I'm not suggesting, each of them was equally called to you as I was, but I know that there were things that I could speak about in the walkabouts, about life in Maine that I didn't know personally, but I could tell stories about life in Vermont or life in Winchester that resonated.
And how's it going? What's it like moving to Maine? And
well, we moved on April 8th to Belmont Street.
Good day to do it.
And it snowed. And in 2019, you can back me up on this, you can look at weather reports. In the month of April in 2019, there were 22 days of snow flurries. And that's not the case in Boston. I was surprised at how different the climates are. And as we know, it's quite close, but it was very different. But because I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it felt very, very, very much like home.
how are we doing over here in the neighborhood church?
Well, let me just
What should we
say,
do? Can you kick us in the bottom and get us going a little bit? Or I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think you need any kicking.
Really?
I think that you are alive in a way, I know that you are alive as a parish church in a way that some people have never known, this level of energy and this regard for people who are not part formally of your Sunday morning community. So Laundry Love, your commitment to Portland Family Promise, your immediate adoption, this is largely because of your expertise and professional background, but as soon as we went into lockdown, you had resources at Trinity Church to move into a digital presence that no other church in Maine had. So it's not always about the priest. I think it's really important to resist this notion that, well, if we just get the right leader. However, in your case, you made a beautiful call.
Yeah, Larry was wonderful.
There's this match between Peter's energy, Peter's gifts, Peter's knowledge of Maine, Peter's love for Maine, all of that coming together. So I see Trinity Church waking up and sort of rising to places that some of you have never been.
Yeah, I agree. But I want to say, like, even the television, Peter had a big role in the engineering computer aspect of the television. I can do the on-screen stuff well, but I couldn't have done that. So without Peter, it wouldn't have gotten done.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the things, I just said this to you earlier this morning. I was with you on Christmas Day here, and I wanted Peter and Angela and the kids to stay at home. And another thing I notice about Trinity Church, I've been here 6 or 7 times in the last 3+ years. And so what I notice is that the church building is really tidy and clean. And I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but I think it's a really important thing to as someone who isn't here week in and week out, when I come here now, I see attention and devotion, not to make the building perfect, but to make the building a resource for you to share. Yeah. Some of the churches that I visit, when I see a lot of clutter in the sacristy, when I see rummage sale bags that are collecting in the hallway for a sale that's going to happen in 6 months, it's sometimes reflective of a lack of energy and a lack of devotion to keeping things up. And I want to highlight this, not to say that it's the end-all and be-all to keep a tidy church, but to say thank you to those of you who are working really hard to open the doors of your church and welcome others. I was just saying to Alice, your new doors literally let light in. Yeah. And they convey something to Forest Avenue. I pay attention to you every day because I see you every day. And I love it on the days, I know you can't do this every day, but I love it on those days when you can have doors open. Yeah. It says a lot. Yeah,
yeah. We have a group of people that we euphemistically call the Monday guys, and they come in and mostly drink coffee. We should work them harder, but they do a magnificent job. And our cleaning lady, Wendy Williams,
whom I just met,
normally I would say, she was vacuuming in the background, and on TV, that's a terrible thing. I like it.
Exactly.
Because it's hard to get a space here where there's not some noise being made.
Exactly.
Sometimes, and that's good. And
exactly.
It is going pretty well. I was delighted to hear you say that. Is there anything you want to share with our audience of maybe 100 people who watch Exciting Episcopalians?
I do. I want to say something about Christmas Day. And for those of you who are part of Trinity Church, I want to say thank you so much for being present on Christmas Day, which this in 2022 was a Sunday. And I learned that there were several churches throughout the Diocese of Maine who chose not to gather on Christmas Day. And I understand that, especially people with families or for whatever reason. But
I'll give you an example, the Greens. We were here for both services,
on
Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Christmas morning's our day. We get the grandkids, and
right.
then they've got to go, and I couldn't come to church.
Absolutely.
And then the bishop came on Christmas Day, and I wasn't in church.
But it was not about me, and this is the story that I want Trinity Church to know. That morning, I think Alice can tell us, I think we were 20 plus people.
Okay.
There were new people who came to Trinity Church on that Sunday because local people who live here in Portland, yeah. who came because they had heard about some of the things that were going on here. Imagine if they had come on Christmas Day and walked up to the front doors and read a sign, or maybe there wasn't even a sign that said, "We're not open today." They probably would have never come back.
Absolutely.
And so I want to thank Trinity Church for keeping Sundays Sunday. Yeah. I say to our churches, there are 52 Sundays, and every one of them needs to be glorious. That we need to put the same attention on the 6th Sunday after the Epiphany as we do on Easter Day. And I felt the truth of that Christmas Day here. It was really beautiful.
It was great having you here, and it was wonderful that you substituted for Peter. Our guest on Exciting Episcopalians, I think this is the outstanding Episcopalian show in the country. I don't know. There must be better ones somewhere. But
no, this is it.
This is how we learn about each other. Thank you so much for joining us. Bishop Brown, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you so much, Bill.
And we're here for you if you need us. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Exciting Episcopalians.
Bless you.